My name is Tori Ingram, and I'm 33. 3 weeks before the most watched wedding in the history of American Restoration television, my parents tore my invitation into confetti at the kitchen table. My mother called me a disgrace. My father said they could only afford one daughter's wedding. My sister stood behind them and smiled. But what they did with that torn invitation was nothing compared to what they'd see on their own television 21 days later, while they were celebrating the daughter they chose. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where quiet people finally get the ending they earned, and the family that wrote them off has to watch it happen. If a family member ever made you feel small for not needing them, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. So let me take you back to the beginning. I'd been a structural engineer for 11 years when this story started, licensed SE in California. The kind of person who reads earthquake data the way most people read weather reports. Not because I had to, but because numbers never lied to me. At 33, I was the lead engineer on the biggest project my firm had ever taken. A landmark estate in Malibu, built in 1928, damaged by 3 earthquakes and 60 years of salt air. And I was the one who had to make sure it didn't fall down during the next one. I ran ETABS models until 2 in the morning. I checked shear wall connections the way a surgeon checks sutures. The foundation had shifted 4 inches over nearly a century, and it was my name on the remediation plan. My grandfather had been a bricklayer in Tulsa. He never went to college. He never left Oklahoma. But when I was 9, he gave me a brass spirit level, small, heavy, warm from his pocket, and said, "Before you build anything, Tori, check if the ground is true." I kept that level on my desk at the firm, right next to my coffee and a framed photo of the Malibu estate before we started work. Cracked plaster, exposed rebar. A building that looked the way I'd felt most of my life. Structurally sound underneath but visibly damaged by the people who should have maintained it. I should tell you about my family. The Ingrams of Norman, Oklahoma. 2 parents, 2 daughters, 1 budget, and a very clear sense of who deserved what. I was the reliable one. Brooke was the radiant one. And somewhere along the way, reliable became invisible. I designed my own wedding invitation. Cream cardstock, blind letterpress, a single sprig of dried lavender tucked inside. I'm an engineer. I measured the margins in millimeters. The envelope was hand-addressed, the postage weighed, the return address printed in a font I'd spent 3 hours choosing. Ridiculous, I know. But that invitation was the first thing I'd ever made for my parents that wasn't useful. Not a tuition payment, not a phone call about Brooke's car insurance, not a wire transfer when their furnace died in January. Just, "Come. Watch me be happy," Daniel warned me. "Maybe lower the bar," he said, flipping the invitation over in his hands. Like, underground. Daniel Maddox. My fiancé, 6'1", broad shoulders, worked construction project management for a commercial builder in Ventura County. He'd seen me absorb my family's nonsense for 4 years and had learned to offer warnings the way you'd offer someone an umbrella. Gently, without insisting. "They'll come," I said. "It's their daughter's wedding." He didn't argue. He just kissed the top of my head and left the room. Which, if you know Daniel, was his version of arguing. I mailed the invitation on a Tuesday. Priority, because I wanted them to get it before Brooke could spin it. I tracked the delivery notification. Delivered. Thursday, 2:47 p.m. I imagined my mother opening it at the kitchen counter, reading the details. Maybe putting it on the fridge next to Brooke's senior portrait that had been there since 2015. 4 days passed. No call. No text. Not even a reaction in the family group chat. Ingram family, with the red heart emoji, that my mother administered like a small country. On the 5th day, I drove to Norman. The kitchen smelled like Diane's lemon cleaner and something burning on the stove. My mother stood at the counter with the invitation in her hand, not on the fridge, not propped against the fruit bowl. In her fist. "Mom." She looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on a good tablecloth. "Tori, we need to talk about this." My father, Wade, sat at the table with his reading glasses on and the sports section open. He didn't look up. A Malibu estate. Diane read the invitation like a warrant. A $40 million property. You expect us to believe this? It's where I'm getting married. Brooke said. I caught it. The pivot to Brooke. My 29-year-old sister wasn't in the room, but she was always in the conversation. Brooke said what? Diane tore the invitation in half, then into quarters. The lavender sprig fell onto the linoleum. Don't humiliate us with that fantasy. Wade folded his newspaper. He still didn't look at me. We can only afford one daughter's wedding. That sentence. 7 words. He said it the way you'd read a bus schedule. Flat, factual, already decided. As if the allocation had been calculated long before I walked in. The cream cardstock pieces lay on the counter like a shattered tile mosaic. I stared at them. My mother turned back to the stove. My father refolded the sports section. I should have yelled. I should have cried. I should have reminded them that I'd wired $6,000 to fix their foundation 2 winters ago. Instead, I stood there doing mental math. Load paths, stress distribution, the tensile strength of things designed to hold. Then I left. I made it to the car before my hands started shaking. Not crying. Shaking. The way a structure vibrates at resonance frequency. Everything inside moving at the same terrible speed, synchronized to the one frequency that could bring it all down. I pulled onto the shoulder of I-35 outside Purcell, 20 minutes from Norman, and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. A semi roared past. The car rocked. I counted load paths. That's what I do when I brake. I don't scream. I don't call anyone. I calculate. Force equals mass times acceleration. A 20-ton truck at 65 miles per hour generates approximately. I couldn't finish the equation. My brain stuttered. I sat there for 40 minutes. When I could breathe again, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the torn pieces of invitation. I don't know when I'd pick them up. Somewhere between the stove and the front door, I'd swept them off the counter without thinking. The way you'd grab a document from a burning building. Not because it's valuable. Because it's evidence. 4 pieces of cream cardstock. Torn edges. The lavender was gone. I could still read fragments. The honor of your presence. And Malibu, California. And Ingram. I put them in the center console. Later I'd find a clear plastic sleeve, the kind I used for site reports, and arrange them inside like an as-built drawing. A record of the thing that broke. Not because I wanted to remember. Because I'm an engineer. And engineers document failures. That's what Diane and Wade had become. A documented failure in a plastic sleeve, filed between a seismic report and a parking receipt. Daniel's mother, Carol Maddox, didn't ask what happened. I showed up at her house in Oxnard at 9:30 on a Wednesday night with mascara I hadn't bothered wearing smudged under my eyes, from rubbing, not crying. And she opened the door, looked at me for 3 seconds and said, "There's pot roast." The Maddox house was small. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen table with a wobbly leg that Daniel's father had shimmed with a folded beer coaster before he passed. The walls were covered in photos. Daniel in Little League, his brother Marcus in a graduation gown, Carol and Pete at the county fair in 1994. Not a single photo was centered. Not a single frame matched. It was the most structurally sound room I'd ever been in. Carol set a plate in front of me, green beans from a can, mashed potatoes from a box. Pot roast that had been slow cooking since 6 a.m. She sat across from me and ate without talking. After 20 minutes, she said, "Family is who shows up." That was it. No follow-up, no therapy, no, tell me everything. Just a sentence and a second helping of potatoes. I'd spent 33 years trying to earn a seat at the Ingram table. Carol Maddox gave me one without a reservation. I know that table. The one where you brace yourself before you sit down. The one where you rehearse your sentences in the car because saying the wrong thing costs you a month of silence. If you've ever had to earn a seat in your own family, stay with me. Because this is the year I stopped auditioning. Comment "seen" if you needed to hear that, and subscribe so you don't miss how it ends. 3 days after the kitchen table, Brooke posted her wedding registry online. 214 items. A KitchenAid stand mixer in pistachio. A honeymoon fun to Santorini. A custom calligraphy set she'd never use. Brooke was marrying Tyler Whitfield, a car dealership marketing coordinator from Edmond. Nice enough guy. Bland smile. Firm handshake. The kind of person who says, "I'll circle back on that," without irony. Their wedding was budgeted at $42,000. I know this because Diane told me the number on the phone 6 months earlier, her voice vibrating with the specific pride of a woman financing her masterpiece. Our father had taken a second draw on their home equity line, $42,000 against a house worth $180,000. We can only afford one daughter's wedding. He'd meant it literally. They'd leveraged the house. I called Daniel that night. "Don't cancel," he said. "Don't shrink. We're getting married exactly the way we planned." The way we planned involves a landmark estate and a television crew. Then that's what we do. He said it simply, the way his mother said things. Without performance or qualification. Just, this is the next step. And we're taking it. I sat on the floor of our apartment in Camarillo and stared at the as-built drawing I'd started building, the invitation in its plastic sleeve, and made a decision. I would not beg. I would not explain. I would not send a second invitation, a follow-up text, a voicemail, or a carefully worded letter designed to be gentle enough that they'd finally hear me. I would build what I was building, and when it aired, they'd see it or they wouldn't. Either way, I'd be married. Let me tell you about the house. The Whitmore estate sat on a bluff in Malibu overlooking the Pacific. Built in 1928 for a railroad heiress. Mediterranean revival. 42 rooms. A limestone colonnade that framed the ocean like a cathedral window. Assessed value: $40 million. Earthquake damage since 1971. Extensive. A preservation foundation had acquired it in 2021 and spent 3 years fundraising for a structural retrofit. My firm, Langford Park Engineers, won the contract. I was the project lead. 26 months of seismic modeling, shear wall reinforcement, foundation underpinning, and a complete restoration of the original stonework facade. I didn't inherit this estate. I didn't marry into it. I kept it from falling down. A national restoration show, Rebuild America, had been documenting the entire process. Cameras in the walls, drone footage of the coastline, time-lapse of the colonnade reconstruction. The show had 4 million weekly viewers and a season finale to plan. The producers had an idea. The estate would reopen as an event venue. The first event, the season finale, should be something hopeful. Something that symbolized restoration. "What if it's a wedding?" the executive producer asked during a site walk. She was looking at me when she said it. The crew had followed me for 8 months. They'd filmed me crawling under floor joists. They'd watched me argue with the county about load-bearing classifications. They'd heard me explain seismic drift to a foundation board that didn't know what it meant. They knew I was engaged. "Your wedding," she clarified. "At the estate you saved. Season finale. 4 million viewers. Minimum." I laughed. Then I stopped laughing. Then I said I'd think about it. The offer was real. The foundation would host the wedding at no cost. Their way of honoring the lead engineer. Rebuild America would film it as the finale. Catering, flowers, a coordinator, covered by the production budget. All Daniel and I needed to bring was ourselves and a marriage license. I sat with the paperwork in our apartment for 3 days. Daniel pretended not to notice. Here's the part that nobody understands unless they've lived it. When your family calls your biggest achievement a fantasy, you start to doubt your own blueprints. Diane had called the Malibu estate that fantasy. Wade hadn't even bothered to ask where it was. And now I was supposed to walk down the aisle of the building I'd spent 2 years saving while 4 million strangers watched. The same building my parents had mocked. "You're not showing off," Daniel said on the 3rd night. He was eating cereal standing up, which meant he'd been thinking about this for hours. "You're just not hiding." Carol called the next morning. She'd heard about the offer from Daniel's brother Marcus. "You take it," she said. It feels like too much. It feels like too much because you've been trained to take up less space than you need. Take the space, Tori. I signed the paperwork that afternoon. The foundation countersigned. The production team scheduled the finale taping for June 14th. 8 weeks out. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell Brooke. I did not post it on social media, mention it in the family group chat, or call Aunt Regina in Broken Arrow to float a rumor. I told my firm, my wedding party, and the Maddox family. Everyone who needed to know, knew. Everyone who didn't, well, they'd find out on television. 6 weeks before the wedding, I almost backed out. Not of the marriage, of the broadcast. The estate. The 4 million viewers and the drone cameras and the restoration show finale that would put my face on a screen my parents might be watching. I was at the firm at 11 p.m., rechecking calculations I'd already verified twice, the sheer wall connections on the east wing, the moment frame detailing in the ballroom, numbers I'd signed off on months ago. But I opened the files again, ran the load cases again, stared at the deflection ratios until the screen blurred. Perfectionism is a polite word for what I actually do. What I actually do is rebuild the same wall 17 times because the first 16 were fine, but maybe the 17th will be undeniable. What I actually do is make sure that no one, not a county inspector, not an earthquake, not my own mother, can look at my work and call it a fantasy. Daniel found me at midnight. He didn't say anything. He pulled up a chair, sat next to me, and waited. What if they're right? I asked. About what? That I'm embarrassing myself. He leaned back. 4 million people are going to watch you walk through a building that was falling apart 2 years ago. You're the reason it's standing. If that embarrasses someone, the problem isn't with the building. I closed the laptop. We drove home in silence. The over-responsibility never fully leaves. I'd spent years being the Ingram who fixed things, absorbed things, calculated things so nobody else had to. The hardest part of walking away from that role wasn't anger. It was the quiet terror that maybe I'd been right to do it. That maybe without me holding the load, there was nothing to hold at all. 5 weeks out, Brooke called. I'd been avoiding Ingram contact since Norman. No texts, no calls, no reactions in the group chat. My phone showed 14 unread messages from Diane, all logistics about Brooke's wedding. And 2 from Wade, both forwarded sports articles. None of them mentioned my invitation. None of them mentioned me. Brooke's name lit up my screen at 4:15 on a Thursday. I picked up because I was driving and my Bluetooth connected automatically. Hey, Tor. Hey. So, I'm doing final seating charts and Mom wanted me to ask, are you bringing a +1 to my wedding? Because we're tight on numbers and I need to know before Friday. I gripped the wheel. I haven't RSVP'd yet. Well, can you? It's kind of important. I let a truck merge in front of me, counted to 5. Brooke, you do know I'm getting married, right? Silence. Then a laugh. Short, performative, the kind she'd been practicing since she was 14, and realized it made adults smile. I mean, sure. Hope your little courthouse thing goes well. It's not a courthouse. Some of us are having a real wedding. She said it like a fact. Like weather. Like the sun rises and Brooke Ingram has a real wedding, and whatever Tori does is theoretical. Then enjoy yours, I said. I'll be busy. I hung up. My hands were steady. My voice had been flat. If you'd listened to the call, you'd think I was discussing a zoning variance, not the moment my sister dismissed my entire life as an administrative footnote. That's the thing about Brooke. She never raised her voice. She never had to. The Ingrams had already decided whose volume mattered, and it wasn't mine. After the call, I drove to the firm and sat in my office with the door closed. The brass spirit level was on my desk, next to a stack of permit applications and a cold cup of coffee. I picked it up. Heavy. Warm, even though the office was cold. The bubble floated dead center. My grandfather, Pete Brennan, had been a bricklayer in Tulsa for 41 years. He built chimneys and retaining walls and the kind of foundations that nobody photographs but everybody stands on. His own family, my grandmother's side, thought he was beneath them. Just a bricklayer, they'd say at holidays, the same way Diane said, just an engineer about me. As if holding things up was a lesser skill than looking good while they stood. He died when I was 16. Left me the spirit level and one sentence. Build on what's true, Tori, not on who claps. I'd put the level on every desk I'd ever had. College, internship, first job in Sacramento, the firm in Ventura. 13 desks, one level. The bubble always found center. I held it now and thought about the Whitmore estate. 96 years old, 3 earthquakes, 4 owners, and a bluff that wanted to swallow it. The foundation had shifted. The walls had cracked. But the bones were good, because whoever poured that original foundation in 1928 hadn't cut corners. The building didn't fall, because someone, once, had built on what was true. I put the level down, opened my laptop, started reviewing the finale logistics. The estate was ready. The retrofit was done. Every connection bolted, every shear wall braced, every inch of that 98-year-old structure reinforced to hold weight it was never originally designed to carry. I was ready too. 4 weeks before the wedding, I opened the family group chat for the first time in a month. I don't know why. Maybe masochism. Maybe the engineer in me needed data. I'd muted the Ingram family thread the night I left Norman, but I hadn't left it. The way you keep a cracked beam in situ while you assess whether it's still load-bearing. I scrolled back to the week of the invitation. Diane had sent 11 messages the day I mailed it. Photos of Brooke's floral arrangements, a link to a bridesmaid dress sale, a prayer hands emoji, normal traffic. Then, on Thursday, delivery day, the thread went quiet for 6 hours. At 8:47 p.m., Brooke had typed a message. Don't waste a stamp on Tori's fake Malibu thing. She's embarrassing herself again. My mother had reacted with a heart. My father had reacted with a thumbs up. No follow-up, no questions, no. Wait, what do you mean? No. Have you talked to her? Just a heart and a thumbs up, ratifying Brooke's assessment as if it were a building permit. Reviewed, approved, filed. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Not shaking this time. Not calculating. Just reading those 3 reactions over and over, the way you'd re-examine a structural failure report until you understood exactly which connection gave way first. It was Brooke. Brooke had told them it was fake. Brooke had seeded the word embarrassing. And my parents, who hadn't asked me a single question about the estate, the show, my fiancé, or my career in 2 years, had taken their youngest daughter's assessment and used it as the engineering report. They didn't shred my invitation because they were cruel. They shredded it because they'd been given bad data. And they never bothered to verify. I didn't reply. That might be the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than the SE exam, harder than the East Wing calculations, harder than standing in that kitchen while my mother tore cardstock. Because replying was what Tori Ingram did. Tori explained. Tori provided documentation. Tori presented the data calmly and waited for the reviewing authority to update their assessment. But the reviewing authority had already stamped approved on Brooke's lie with a heart emoji and a thumbs up. So I did nothing. I muted the thread again, set the phone face down, went back to the finale logistics spreadsheet and started calculating sightlines for the ceremony aisle. Specifically, how the evening light would hit the restored limestone colonnade at 6:30 p.m. Pacific on June 14th. Daniel noticed. You okay? I found the message. He waited. Brooke told them I was making it up. The estate, the wedding, all of it. She called it my fake Malibu thing. They believed her. What are you going to do? Nothing. He set down his beer. Nothing? If I correct the record, I'm auditioning again. I'm the one who brings proof to people who don't want evidence. They want a reason to dismiss me. Brooke gave them one. They took it. Correcting it just resets the cycle. Daniel nodded slowly. So, what's the plan? The plan is, I get married. The show airs. Reality does the correcting. Silence is a weapon most people don't know how to use because it feels like losing. I spent 33 years in a family that equated volume with value. Diane spoke and everyone listened. Brooke spoke and everyone adjusted. I spoke and everyone waited for me to finish so they could get back to the people who mattered. This time, the silence would be mine. 3 weeks out. The estate was in its final stage, painters touching up the ballroom ceiling, landscape crews replanting the original terraced garden from archival photos. The production team was building a camera rig in the colonnade, 22 feet of tracking rail so they could dolly alongside the aisle during the ceremony. I walked the property with the showrunner marking camera placements. She pointed to the east wing. My wing, the one I'd spent 14 months engineering from the inside out. "This is where we'll cut to the live audience numbers," she said. "Before you walk in." Live audience. I'd known it intellectually, but hearing it made the walls feel closer. That weekend, the Maddoxes came down from Oxnard. Carol, Marcus, Marcus's wife Jen, and their 2 kids. They set up at our apartment like a construction crew. Organized, efficient, slightly loud. Jen ironed my veil. Marcus built a card box. Carol organized the seating chart using the dining table and a system of color-coded post-its that I, an engineer, found genuinely impressive. "How many from your side?" Carol asked, pen hovering. "Daniel's side is my side." She looked at me for a moment. Then she wrote my name on a green post-it and stuck it in the center of the table. I went to my desk afterward and opened the plastic sleeve. The invitation pieces, 4 of them, torn, cream-colored, were inside. I took them out and taped them together with clear packing tape. Not neatly. The edges didn't align. The lavender was gone. But you could read it again. I set it on the desk next to the brass level. Not a keepsake. An as-built drawing of what had failed and what I'd decided to build instead. 2 weeks out. Rebuild America dropped its finale promo. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed 14 times in 2 minutes. The show's social accounts had posted a 30-second trailer, drone footage of the estate at golden hour, a time-lapse of the colonnade going from rubble to restoration, a voiceover about the engineer who brought a landmark back from the edge, and a final shot of the estate's front doors opening to reveal white chairs and rose petals. No face shots of me, no name, just the building, the work, and a date. June 14th, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. 9 p.m. Central. Oklahoma time. Within an hour, the promo had 200,000 views. My firm's website crashed. My boss called from a golf course to say congratulations and, also, could I please talk to IT? Daniel texted, "You see the trailer?" Me. "Yep." Him. "You telling your family?" Me. "No." Him. "Okay." That was the entire conversation. 2 people who understood that some doors close because you shut them, and reopening them isn't generosity. It's an invitation for the same people to walk through and break the same things. I went home that night and sat in the quiet. Our apartment was small. 1 bedroom, a galley kitchen, a living room where the couch faced the window instead of the TV because I liked watching the hills more than screens. Daniel was at the stove making pasta. Carol had sent him her sauce recipe on a napkin, which he'd photographed and taped to the cabinet. The finale would air nationwide. My parents watched Rebuild America occasionally. Diane liked the before and after reveals. Whether they'd see this one was a coin flip. I didn't flip the coin. I didn't need to. One thing I hadn't told you yet. Brooke's bridal shower was scheduled for June 14th. Same day as my wedding. Same day as the finale. I found out through Aunt Regina, who called to ask if I was doing anything that weekend, in the careful tone of someone defusing a landmine. "I'm getting married, Regina." Right. It's just, your mother's hosting Brooke's shower at the house, and she's invited 40 people, and they're doing a watch party afterward because Brooke's fiancé likes that house show. What's it called? Rebuild America. I set my coffee down. They're watching Rebuild America at Brooke's shower? Diane rented a projector. She wants to do a cozy night in theme after the games. Your father set up a screen in the living room. I could have warned them. 1 text. 1 sentence. The finale is about my project and my wedding. That's all it would have taken to spare everyone the collision. But sparing them was the old pattern, the load-bearing pattern, the one where I absorbed impact so the rest of the structure stayed comfortable. We can only afford one daughter's wedding. Wade's sentence came back. They'd said it standing over my shredded invitation while Brooke smiled. They'd financed a $42,000 wedding by leveraging their house. They'd planned a shower and a watch party and a projector and 40 guests. All for the daughter they'd invested in. The finale would air at 8 p.m. Central. They'd be sitting in the living room, full of cake and champagne, watching a show about the estate their other daughter had saved. I didn't need to warn them. Reality was going to walk through the door on its own. 2 days later, Aunt Regina called again, this time without the careful tone. Tori, I need to say something. Go ahead. Your mother is hurting. She won't say it, but she is. And I think if you just called her, just once, and explained about the wedding, she'd what? Regina paused. She'd understand. I was at the firm. The brass level was 6 inches from my hand. I ran my thumb across the edge of my desk. Regina, did Mom ask you to call me? Not in those words. Did she tell you she tore my invitation apart? Silence. Did she mention that she and Dad reacted to Brooke's message calling my wedding a fake Malibu thing with a heart emoji and a thumbs up? Longer silence. Tori. I'm not angry, I'm just not available. I said it the way I'd say, the foundation meets code. No heat, no performance. A statement of condition. Regina sighed. Blood is blood, sweetheart. Blood doesn't tear up invitations. She didn't have a response for that. We sat with the dead air for 10 seconds, long enough for a full structural assessment. And then she said she'd pray for me, which in Oklahoma means the conversation is over, and she's lost. After the call, I sat with my hands flat on the desk. The old Tori. The over-responsible Tori. The one who fixed furnaces and financed foundations and mediated holidays. She would have called Diane. She would have presented evidence. She would have opened the group chat, screenshotted Brooke's message, and built a case. The new Tori checked the bubble on the spirit level, confirmed it was centered, and opened the seating chart. 10 days before the wedding, Rebuild America released the full finale press package. This one had my name. Structural engineer Tori Ingram leads historic Malibu restoration and celebrates her wedding at the estate she saved. The headline ran in 3 trade publications and 2 entertainment outlets. The show's Instagram posted a photo of me on the colonnade, hard hat off, blueprints in hand, the Pacific behind me like a postcard. 2 million impressions in 48 hours. My firm's managing partner called to say we'd received 4 project inquiries referencing the article. A university in San Luis Obispo invited me to guest lecture. A foundation in Santa Barbara asked if I'd consult on their own restoration. The show booked an additional camera crew for the wedding. Live viewer estimates climbed past the 4 million weekly average. The producers talked about 5, maybe 6. I looked at the numbers the way I looked at seismic data. Interesting, useful, not the point. The point was that in 10 days I would marry Daniel Maddox in a building I'd kept standing, surrounded by people who didn't need a second invitation. There's a specific kind of quiet you learn when you stop explaining yourself to people who already decided who you are. They don't hear you louder. They don't hear you softer. They just don't hear you. Because the frequency you're broadcasting on isn't the one they're tuned to. If you're in that quiet right now, I promise it ends somewhere good. Stay till the end. And subscribe. Because the part everyone messages me about is coming. Meanwhile, in Norman, Oklahoma, Diane Ingram was ordering a projector rental for her daughter's bridal shower. The one scheduled for June 14th. At 8 p.m. Central. I don't know when Diane first saw the promo. I only know what happened after. According to Aunt Regina, who told me months later in a diner in Tulsa, with the kind of reluctant precision that meant she'd replayed it 100 times, it happened 6 days before the wedding. Diane was scrolling Facebook in bed. The Rebuild America page had boosted the finale promo. It autoplayed. Drone footage, colonnade, time-lapse. And for 3 seconds, just 3. A wide shot of a woman in a hard hat checking connections on a steel bracket, her profile barely visible. Diane paused it, stared, then called Brooke. Brooke's response, relayed to Regina by a cousin who overheard. "Mom, that's not her. They edit those things. It's stock footage." It looked like Tori. "It's not. Trust me." And Diane did. Because trusting Brooke was the load-bearing wall of the Ingram family structure. Remove it and the whole thing collapses. The shower, the wedding budget, the narrative that they'd invested in the right daughter. In the group chat, Ingram family with the heart, Brooke posted a laughing emoji and typed, "LOL, someone on that house show looks like Tor. Photoshop much?" Wade reacted with a laughing emoji. Diane reacted with nothing. Which, for Diane, was as close to doubt as she ever came. 6 days. That's how long they had. 6 days in which one Google search, one phone call, one single question directed at me, would have cracked the whole thing open. They could have found the press release. They could have read my name in a headline. They could have called me and said, "Is this you?" And I would have said yes. They didn't search. They didn't call. They believed Brooke. Again. Because believing Brooke was easier. 3 days before the wedding, I was sitting in the estate's east wing running a final walkthrough. Every bolt, every weld, every connection. The building inspector had signed off 4 months ago. The county had issued the occupancy permit. The production team's safety coordinator had cleared the space. There was no engineering reason to be here at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, crawling under floor joists I'd already photographed 16 times. But I was here. Because that's who I am. I sat on the limestone floor of the main gallery and looked up at the ceiling I'd reinforced with carbon fiber strips. Invisible from below. Strong enough to carry 3 times the original load. The building didn't know what was coming. The guests, the cameras, the flowers, the music. It just stood there, doing what it had been designed to do. In structural engineering, there's a concept called load redistribution. When one column fails, when a support gives way, the remaining structure doesn't collapse, as long as the other columns are strong enough to absorb the transferred load. The system adapts. The load finds new paths. The Ingrams had been my primary column for 33 years. They'd failed. The load had to go somewhere. Carol, Daniel, Marcus, Jen. The crew at Langford Park who'd worked beside me for 6 years. The foundation board who'd trusted me with their building. The Maddox kitchen table with the shimmed leg and the mismatched frames. The load had redistributed, and the structure held. I reached into my blazer pocket and felt the brass level, cold from the morning air. I'd decided to carry it on the wedding day, tucked inside, close to the chest, where Grandfather Pete would have wanted it. Not a prop, an instrument. Still telling me the ground was true. The night before my wedding, I Ready? I've been ready since I signed the retrofit contract. He laughed. That was 2 years ago. Exactly. We drove to Malibu separately, me with Carol, him with Marcus. Tradition, Carol insisted, even though she also insisted on playing her own wedding playlist from 1987, which was mostly power ballads, and one inexplicable polka. The estate was different in the morning. Without the crew, without the cameras, without the lights and cables and directors' chairs. It was just a building. Limestone and steel and 98 years of standing. The Pacific crashed below the bluff. The colonnade threw long shadows across the garden. I walked through the east wing alone. My wing. Touched the steel brackets I'd spec'd. Ran my hand along the sheer wall I'd designed. Felt the brass level in my blazer pocket. The bubble finding center through 2 layers of fabric. Whatever happened on that broadcast, it happened without me asking permission. By noon, the crew had arrived. 22 cameras. A live production truck. Satellite uplink. The showrunner ran through the schedule. Ceremony at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. The finale episode would air the ceremony live, preceded by a 30-minute retrospective of the restoration. At 4:15, I stood behind the estate's front doors in a white dress and flat shoes, holding a bouquet of gardenias and California poppies. No Ingrams in the audience. Every seat full anyway. The doors opened, and I walked into the light. 6:30 p.m. The evening sun hit the colonnade exactly the way I'd calculated. Golden, lateral, casting the limestone in the warm tone that made the restoration footage so effective. I'd checked those angles 6 months ago during site planning. I'd never imagined I'd be the one walking through them in a white dress. The aisle was 72 feet of reclaimed Italian stone, flanked by white chairs and gardenias. At the end stood Daniel, hands clasped, wearing a charcoal suit and the expression he got when he was trying very hard not to cry. Jaw tight, eyes wide, a half smile that said everything his voice wouldn't. Carol sat in the front row in a blue dress she'd bought on sale at Macy's, Marcus and Jen next to her. Their kids held flower baskets. My colleagues from Langford Park filled the third row. Engineers? Architects? The woman from IT who'd crashed our website and felt terrible about it. The host of Rebuild America stood to the side, narrating live. I heard fragments through the ambient mic. The engineer who spent 26 months bringing this estate back from the edge. And her wedding, the first event in the restored landmark. I didn't hear the viewer count. I learned it later. 5.2 million at the start of the ceremony. By the time I said I do, it was 6.1. 6.1 million people watched me marry Daniel Maddox in a building that had survived 3 earthquakes because I'd reinforced every connection, checked every weld, and signed my name on every page of the structural report. The officiant said, "You may kiss the bride." Daniel did. The audience, live and broadcast, applauded. I felt the brass level in my pocket, warm against my ribs. The ground was true. In Norman, Oklahoma, it was 8:30 p.m. Central. I wasn't there. I'm telling you what I was told later. By Aunt Regina. By 2 cousins. By a neighbor named Patty, who still brings it up at church. Brooke's bridal shower had ended an hour earlier. The games. The gifts. The cake. Shaped like a wedding dress. 40 women in Diane's living room, full of champagne and finger sandwiches, settling in for the cozy night in portion of the evening. Wade had set up the projector. The rented screen covered the wall where Brooke's senior portrait usually hung. Diane clicked to the network. Rebuild America. Season finale. The opening sequence. Drone footage of the estate. Golden hour. The Pacific shimmering. Then the retrospective. 26 months of restoration condensed into 30 minutes of before and after footage. And there I was. Hard hat. Blueprints. Checking steel connections in the East Wing. My voice in a sit-down interview. This building survived because someone 98 years ago didn't cut corners on the foundation. Diane's hand went to her mouth. According to Regina, the room didn't react immediately. It took people a moment to reconcile the woman on the screen with the name they'd been told to forget. But then someone said, "Isn't that Tori?" And the air changed. The retrospective ended. The live feed began. The estate's front doors opened. A woman in a white dress and flat shoes walked down a 72-foot aisle of reclaimed Italian stone. Diane stood up. Wade's reading glasses slid off his face. Brooke set down her champagne flute and stared. 40 women watched Tori Ingram marry Daniel Maddox on a $40 million estate she'd saved from collapsing, broadcast to 6 million viewers, on the same night they'd gathered to celebrate the daughter who'd called it a fantasy. Nobody looked at Brooke. For the first time in 29 years, nobody looked at Brooke. My phone started buzzing during the reception. I'd set it on silent for the ceremony, but during the first dance, Daniel leading, me following badly, both of us laughing, I felt it vibrating against the brass level in my pocket, a persistent pulse, like a seismic tremor that wouldn't stop. I ignored it. We cut the cake. Carol gave a toast that started with, "I always wanted a daughter," and ended with, "Now I have one." And I had to hold my glass very still to keep from spilling. Marcus's kids threw flower petals at people who weren't expecting it. The show's cameras captured everything. After the toast, I stepped outside onto the terrace. The Pacific was black. The estate's lights reflected off the water. I pulled out my phone. 47 missed calls, 23 text messages. The group chat, Ingram family with the heart, had exploded. Diane. Tori, call me immediately. Diane. Call me. Diane. We're so proud of you, honey. Diane. Why didn't you tell us? Wade. Princess, please call home. Brooke. OMG, Tori? Brooke. This is insane, you should have said something. Diane. We didn't know it was real. Diane. We would have been there. Diane. Call me back, please, I'm your mother. 23 messages. Not one apology. Not one acknowledgement that they'd torn the invitation, believed the lie, funded one daughter's wedding while calling the others a fantasy. Just panic. Just a family that realized the structure they'd neglected was the one the whole country was watching. I stood on the terrace with 6 million people on the other side of the broadcast and my family melting down on the other side of the phone. The waves crashed. The cameras hummed inside. Daniel was probably wondering where I'd gone. I read every message twice. I felt the phone buzz with incoming number 48. Then I put it back in my pocket. Went inside. Danced with my husband. It was 11:14 p.m. Pacific when I finally responded. The reception was over. The cameras had stopped. The crew was wrapping cable. Daniel was in the estate's kitchen eating leftover cake with Marcus while Carol organized the gift table like a woman who'd been waiting her whole life to organize a gift table. I sat alone in the east wing, my wing, on a limestone bench beneath the ceiling I'd reinforced. The phone screen was bright in the dark. The group chat was still going. Diane had sent 31 additional messages since the terrace. Wade had called 9 more times. Brooke had posted a video of herself crying, captioned, "Why does everything have to be about Tori?" I scrolled to the top, past the panic, past the pride they'd manufactured in real time, past the "we didn't know" and the "we're so proud" and the "call me, I'm your mother," all the way back to Brooke's message from 5 weeks ago. "Don't waste a stamp on Tori's fake Malibu thing. She's embarrassing herself again." Heart. Thumbs up. And then Wade, flat as a bus schedule. "We can only afford one daughter's wedding." I looked at that sentence. Then I looked at the limestone walls around me. The $40 million estate that had aired on live television, while my family sat in a living room with a rented projector and watched the wrong daughter's moment become the one everyone would remember. I typed 2 words. Too late. Sent. I closed the app. Powered off the phone. Set it on the limestone bench. The estate was quiet. The crew had left. The waves were steady. The brass level was still in my pocket. The bubble still centered. Not a revenge. Not a declaration. Just a boundary. 2 words that said, "The door was open and you chose not to walk through it. Now it's closed, and I'm the one who closed it." Too late. The finale aired to 6.1 million viewers. It was the highest-rated episode in Rebuild America's 7-season run. The next morning, the show released a post-episode feature on their website. Meet Tori Ingram, the structural engineer behind the Whitmore estate restoration, my professional photo, my credentials. A quote from the foundation's board chair calling the retrofit one of the most significant preservation engineering projects on the West Coast in a decade. My firm received 11 project inquiries in 48 hours. A cable news show requested an interview. The university in San Luis Obispo doubled its guest lecture offer. Back in Norman, Brooke's bridal shower was the talk of the neighborhood, but not for the reasons Brooke wanted. Patty from church told a friend, who told Regina, who told me. The shower guests had spent the rest of the night Googling my name, reading articles, watching clips. By the time they left Diane's house at midnight, 40 women had a very specific understanding of which Ingram daughter had a real wedding. Brooke's own wedding, scheduled for August, was still happening. Still $42,000. Still financed by a home equity draw on a house that was now worth less than the line. Nobody canceled anything. Nobody said anything publicly. But the math had changed. The math always changes when the data is visible. That's what engineers know. You can ignore a cracked foundation for years, decades even, as long as nobody sees the report. But once the report is public, once 6 million people have watched the building stand and the cracks become undeniable, the load-bearing assumptions have to be recalculated. The Ingrams were recalculating. I was not available for consultation. In the weeks that followed, the redistribution continued. 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent emails. Real ones, not forwarded sports articles. I saw the finale. I'm sorry I wasn't there. A college friend from Oklahoma State texted a screenshot of the show's website and said, "This is the Tori I always knew." My firm offered me a principal position. I took it. Carol framed a still from the broadcast, me walking the aisle, Daniel waiting, and hung it on the wall in Oxnard, between Marcus's graduation and Pete's county fair photo. Same mismatched frame style, same slightly off-center placement. It fit. Diane left 4 voicemails in the first week. I listened to the first one. She cried. She said I should have told her. She said Brooke had confused her. She said she was proud of me and always had been. She didn't say sorry. She said, "We can only afford one daughter's wedding" had been taken out of context, which is a phrase people use when the context is the problem. Brooke posted an Instagram story 3 days later. A photo of her own wedding venue with the caption, "Our dream day is coming,"